Now we're live.
We're live. Hey.
We're live.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Live from the Fluorescent Mineral Capital of the World. Today, we have another special guest, been here before, Phil Crabb, who is not only a trustee of the Franklin Mineral Museum, but he is also the Franklin Town historian. He's got a presentation for us today of, Phil, what are we going over today?
Today,
Come on, Phil.
today we will be talking about the earliest mining operations in Franklin for zinc, which started in the open cut and progressed to what we'll talk about as the Western Branch. And the interesting things that happened back then that with regards to the uncoordinated efforts that much of this mining was until the zinc company finally consolidated in 1898. So that's what we're going to be going over. We're going to see some progressive views of the open cut and then of the West Branch, like up by the Trotter area.
So before Phil gets and takes over the show completely, because we know that's how Phil is, and that's fine. We have a few updates for you. Lauren, would you like to go over what you have for us first?
All right. So coming up, of course, we have a few of our night digs. So we are going to have one on Saturday, September 3rd, Labor Day weekend. We also have one on October 1st, one on November 5th, and another special one that is going to be on October 22nd. They will all be from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Again, there is no pre-registration for that. Now, the one on October 22nd is also going to be after the mill site pile dig. That will be on that Saturday, and that is from 11 to 3 p.m. We will be doing our registration in mid-September. So the weekend of the Fall Mineral Show is when we will go live with that registration.
That again, as in the past with the mill site dig, those who register for the mill site dig will get free admission to the night dig, and they will just be paying the poundage fee. The other exciting news that we have is for the fall mineral sale in Kreisel Hall, Franklin Mineral Museum was able to acquire the Don Newsom collection. I believe most of you know who Don Newsom is. He was the founder and the brainchild behind Ultra Bright and also the Fluorescent Mineral Society. Kreisel will have at their fall mineral show, at their fall sale, they will have cabinet specimens from his collection that we've acquired, along with also cabinet specimens from the late Mark Ledger. So it's a very exciting next month and a half for the Franklin Mineral Museum. We're kind of in crazy mode, getting ready for the fall show. I believe at this point we are sold out on our indoor vendors, and we may have one space left in the pavilion at the Franklin Mineral Museum. So we're looking forward to the next 3 or 4 weeks. We're busy, but we're excited to see everybody at these shows. What we're going to do today is kind of turn it over to Phil, let him do his presentation, but we're also going to be answering any questions that you have on the slides that are coming up. So feel free to type it out, and we hope you enjoy the show. Phil, it's all you.
Thank you.
Yo, Ken, what's up?
Hey, Kenny.
Okay. Melissa, I will get back in touch with you after the end of this. I'll come back to your comments, and we can try to figure out what brand it is and everything else on that. So yeah, we can help you and point you in the right direction for getting a new bulb.
I just have to click on this down here, right? On this one to open it up?
Nope. You will just go right to there.
I got it. All right. Thanks very much. What we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth with some media that we've put together. We've put together about a 29 slide deck, and we're going to talk behind it. We're going to talk over top of it. But this is how we're going to go forward. The first thing I'd like you to look at is this is something that almost all of us are familiar with. This is the open cut today. You notice that it has a swimming dock on it. It's been filled up with water, but I want you to notice a couple things as we go forward. One is at the wall to the right, which is the easterly wall. For those of you, just for reference, Buckwheat Road is just out of frame to the right. You notice how the westerly wall is almost vertical, all right? And we're going to see later on the easterly wall, that the wall that's on the left is on a 53-degree angle. We're going to see why. And the other thing I'd like you to notice too is the notch in the distance. You see where the vertical notch is there to the right of the swimming raft. We're going to be referring back to that often. The open cut was where zinc mining started in Franklin. The interesting thing was it wasn't really the Dutch that started the mining there, but it was the Dutch that discovered it. One thing about the Franklin ore body and the Sterling Hill ore body is they were both outcropped within eyesight of the Wallkill River, which is what the Dutch were following to come north. So it was very convenient for them to discover these two ore bodies. This one in Franklin here was referred to by some as Crystal Mountain, because this whole open area that you see here used to be a rounded off hill that went to the back edge. Well, we're going to go forward. We're going to talk and we're going to see a little bit about what the progression of mining was here. So very early on, when they discovered that there was zinc exposed to the surface, it's what's called an outcrop, meaning that the ore body that we're going to talk about was at the surface in this particular position. And they saw what they thought was copper materials, but it was actually zincite. And they really tried hard to like use it as copper, but finally, as the years went by, they decided that yeah, this is going to be zincite, and this is how we need to concentrate it. This is the same open cut that we just looked at that had the water in it. But you can see here, this is what it looks like now. Back then, it was a wide open pit, and this is one of the earliest depictions of it, because you can see that they're still working on that tier that's in the rear there. You see all the donkey carts that are down on the floor of the open cut, and they were there to mine out and to cart away the very well-defined ore body that was here. Let's talk a little bit more about that ore body. And the other thing I want you to look at is right at the back of the picture here, right in front of that building that has the roof facing you. That's where that notch was. But you can see that there's no notch there now because there's ore in there, and we're going to talk about that. The Franklin ore body looked like this. This is a cross section. If you were to take a slice at the very end of the ore body, it would look like this. It looks like a fish hook. Whereas up here on the upper left-hand side, just to the right of the C that's on the left, the ore body came right up to the surface. It was very thin going down, and you'll see that 53-degree angle there. But at the bottom, it got much thicker and was folded over to make it look like a fish hook. Picture this same pattern going all the way through the ore body from the open cut where this was all at the surface, all the way back to, for those of you that know Franklin, about a mile towards the northwest and ended up under Sterling Street at a depth of 650 feet, pretty close to where Riggio's market was. This ore body went down as deep as the Empire State Building is tall. As a matter of fact, the deepest part of the ore body is underneath the pavilion in Fireman's Park. So this is an example of what that fish hook looked like. You can see on the left, the thinner ore coming down on that 53-degree level. The ore is the darker material that you see here. And then it gets down to the bottom and curls back up in what looks like a fish hook. This looks exactly like what this diagram looked like here. And it was down by the bottom of that fish hook that the ore was folded over and very thick. So of course, back in these non-technology days, they went after the ore that was the easiest to get. And that was down at the bottom right by where the fish hook is. Now, if you remember me saying that this ore body looked just like these fish hooks, one behind the other, all the way down for the next mile north of here, what they did was they disregarded the darker ore that's on the left coming down the hill, because that would have been difficult to mine out, and rather went after the easy low-hanging ore that was down here on the lower right by the fish hook. And this is a close-up of what that fish hook looks like. And you can see that they could go right down into it. They could just follow it down. The only thing that they had to worry about was to leave this little ceiling here just underneath the 1900 date, because they didn't want that falling down. But this hole to the right, if you can picture these little fish hooks going one behind the other for the whole length of the ore body, they followed this initial hole all the way down on an incline, on the same incline as what the ore body was, all the way down to the 300 level. Then they had to start thinking about like better mining methods, because it was, you know, a football field to bring this ore back up to this point. You also see here that they've got a suspended crane that has a little scoop on it. They use this to bring the ore out from here. I'm making my cursor move. You can't see it. But at the bottom right, they would pull the ore out of the hole and then lift it up for processing on a plant where the Franklin Mineral Museum is today. And we're going to see that shortly. It also used this suspended scoop to take out waste rock. And as we'll see later, it would be dumped up on where the Taylor Road dump is today. That's still collected today. But this is a little bit close up, and you can see the little hook part of that fish hook there.
All right. Now, I know we had a comment from Ken
Okay.
asking how they got the carts out.
Well, they lifted them out and they lifted them in by the same suspended cable that you see here. They also use that to leverage putting the donkeys in too. The donkeys that would pull those carts. So they would use that crane for their own. We're going to see a picture later on where they put a little walking path on that left hillside, but that looked a little bit risky. Yeah, catchy to say the least.
How many donkeys would they have in there?
When they would take one per cart, and I saw probably 25 carts there. And the interesting thing about the donkeys is when they lifted them up and out at the end of the day, they would just let them loose, and they would each go find their own stable, you know, without anybody leading them. As a matter of fact, there's a local guy that used to go to the bar after a long day's work, but he would ride his donkey there, and he would tie it up, and he'd have his couple beers or something like this. And when he couldn't drive himself home, he'd just get back on the donkey, and the donkey would take him home. You know, a media.
Beats DWI.
Yeah. Now this is a view of where that ore went to. This is taken from across what's now Franklin Ave, looking back towards the Mineral Museum and its associated buildings back then in the upper left, above what is a very substantial mineral dump. For all my mineral friends here, look how tall the edge of the mineral dump is. It's got to be 20 feet tall. The shape of the Wallkill River that's there today was defined by the size of the mineral dump. Now, they did reprocess a lot of these minerals, but the sheer weight of all that rock, I'm sure, pushed some good stuff down into the mud that's below it there. Now, look up at the hillside right below the buildings there, and you can see all the different places that ore cars would come over and dump their material over the side of the bank. You can see the little V patterns there. All right. So this mineral dump built up quickly. To give you an idea what you're looking at here, you can see the plant buildings at the top of the hill. Right in the middle, there's a lighter colored building, lighter colored brick building. That's the building that we're in right now. That's the Mineral Museum. To give you a perspective, the quarry to the far right that you see over there, that's where the shooting range is today. That was the quarry that they used to mine Franklin marble as flux for the iron mine furnaces, which we'll talk about shortly here too.
Right now, Ken?
So now,
does that mean we need to rent out donkeys for people that go collecting on the dump
On the
sites?
dump, sure.
well, you know what? You are what you ride. So
Exactly.
So I don't know what's going on here. If we go to this one, remember we were just showing you the picture here of the processing plant, and you see this big tall building here. That's what you're looking at here, but this is taken from Evans Street. So the Mineral Museum that we're in now would be behind this coal pile here, and we're standing on Evans Street that you'll see isn't really Evans Street yet, but has railroad tracks of the Mine Hill Railroad on it. This building here with the inclinators going down to where that big hole was. All right. Now in this year, which is around 1901, brings the ore up and out to put through the processing plant that's in that taller, dark building there. And it also goes through some other processes before it was dumped that we'll see in just a little bit. So you're looking from Evans Street here, looking back towards the corner of Stephen Phillips's property, because this is where that incline went. And this is a look at the same thing, but from the opposite end of the open cut. Now, this is a really unique picture. This is that building right in their middle that we were just looking at, that has the two inclined conveyors to bring material out. Lauren, here's all the little donkey carts with the donkeys, because they've been working on that vertical east wall there. You notice how there's hardly any effort being done on the west side. There's just nobody working, because that would be very, very difficult. And why do something difficult when they got the ore sitting right there? Now, the reason why this picture's special is just look to the left of the building that has the inclinators on, and you see the Franklin Iron Company in full swing. Now, the Franklin Iron Company used to be the nation's richest iron mine until the Mesabi Range opened up. But look at this picture. Think about it. You're in Franklin. On one side of Church Street, you've got the world's, or you have the country's largest iron mine at that time. Just across the street, you've got what's going to be the world's largest zinc mine. Talk about a geological oddity, talking about a geological Disneyland. Now, just above that inclinator building, up on that hill where you hardly see any trees. The reason why you don't see any trees is because they used them as their timbers for the mining operations. That little bit of trees right there is left there because that's where the old Catholic cemetery is. I live right behind those trees. This is the little hill going up to my house. There's no golf course yet to the upper right, and this is a very unique moment in time capture. And I believe that's the only picture that we know of that captured both operations in full swing. This is another picture, but earlier. You can see that you've got the suspended cable, like crane system to get everything out. But you notice that they're still working on a back ledge here of the open cut. This is, again, looking back from behind Trotter, behind Borough Hall, or for some of you, older friends here, behind where the old bank was, looking back to the mineral museum. You can see that the big inclinator has been taken out, and this is where that big hole is, but there's a lot of work that they haven't done. You notice how in this picture, rather than the very first picture that we saw, this wall is not vertical yet. That's all ore that they're going to take out of there.
Do you know the date on this picture?
This is earlier than the inclinator.
So this was This was probably New Jersey Zinc Company bought everybody out in what, 1898?
1898. The only thing is, I still see to the left of the crane here, iron company buildings with smoke coming out of their smokestacks.
So sometime between 1898 and 1901, obviously.
I think it's probably pre-consolidation. I don't think we're at 1898. I think we're in the early or the late 1880s. And I'll tell you why in a second. This is about where Ding Dong Shaft is, that little platform that's on the lower right. Actually. Yeah. But you can see all the guys working. This is all ore here, you know?
It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's like really something. This is a better close-up of that hole in later years. That's that same fish hook that we saw, but they've extended this down to the 300-foot level. That notch that we saw vertical, that was ore that was there, meant that there was ore all along this right-hand wall, and you can see how the right-hand wall is almost vertical in the middle left there.
They've removed the ore from the notch at that point.
They have not. You can see that there.
Yeah.
That's the notch to the middle left.
To the west.
All right. And you've got all the donkeys here taking out the ore. They've been working the wall there because they can, because the ore is there. They don't have to go work for it. It's already there. Now, look down at the hole and look back to the right, and you can see all that dark ore that's there still. They couldn't take everything out because it would make it collapse.
Right.
And you've got people that could walk like through here freely, you know. They also had to be careful as to what was above that black hole there to make sure that it didn't collapse, because that looks like ore too, but the ore came up above that and they had to leave it in at that point. Now, this is the operation again on the back side where the mineral dump was. If you look in the very middle, the lightest colored building is the Franklin Mineral Museum. That's where we're at now. But you have the inclinator on the left. You got these other buildings. And as it went through process, it ended up coming out and being loaded onto ore cars here, down on the bottom right. You can see how it comes down the hill, the two buildings come down the hill and load all these string of war cars there. Well, how did they get from there to to where they would take the zinc to make ingots? Well, if you look out towards the upper right, you can see where that railroad would go straight out. For those of you that were at the mill site dig when we had you park over by the pond and had you come in, when you walked in that road there, which is where the railroad is in this picture, you would have seen the abutments for the bridge that took you across the street to the Franklin Pond. Well, that bridge is no longer there, but it is the bridge that carries the railroad across across Passaic Ave to get into the Sterling mine. And you can see the little ore cars on the bottom left by the building there. They also brought waste rock out of the open cut through a tunnel that they made where they could bring it right into here where the dump was. But boy, for all of my mineral friends, look at all this ore. When you come back, and if the Mineral Museum is this light building here, you know that every square foot of land that we're walking on in the parking lot is this dump door. This is a very very early operations. Here's the notch right in the middle. You can see the notch and you see a little hole at the bottom of it. But if you look to the upper left, there's a perfectly square hole coming out of the side of the wall. That is a mystery to almost all of us. That shouldn't be there. I mean, unless it's the mystical 70-foot level that came from the Hamburg Road mine. But in this picture, if you were to squeeze in, you could see that you've got steam pipes coming out of it. You've got water pipes coming out of it. And to the right, you can see the darker notch that has the ore in it still. But they started mining out of the bottom because at the notch, it was at this point that the ore body stopped being an outcrop, meaning being able to be seen at the surface, and started its dive down to 1,500 feet. The other thing that you notice is that they've built a walkway. If you look to the left edge, you can see a walkway that at least can take people and carts down to that first tier that they're working on, the lighter first tier. You can see a tier above that. If you were able to zoom this in up at the very top in the fields, you can see cows. And the reason why is that they call this the buckwheat mine because this used to be a buckwheat field. Think about all this open space that you see here was removed by miners many times, taking a chisel, hitting it, turning it, taking another chisel, hitting it, turning it, blasting it almost exclusively by hand by Hungarians. And you can see that they're just starting to think about trying to work on this left 53 degree incline side of the hill there. To give you perspective, Trotter would be just out of frame to the left towards the top. Fireman's Park would be just over this hill. Buckwheat Road would be to the right edge here, but it's just a cow path in these days. And you can still see that they've got ore to take out on the bottom right because this wall is not vertical yet. And this is a close-up of that mysterious square drift, all right? And we're not sure what this is, unless it was. There's always been discussion that there's pictures of the 70-foot drift coming out into the open cut. Maybe this is it. Why else would they go inside? Because this drift would have been chiseled from the inside out. They wouldn't have done it from the outside in. So it's a real mystery. If you look just to the right of that, you can very easily see the vertical notch that's still got ore in it, the darker ore there. This is an interesting and confounding picture.
Now, when are those pictures roughly from?
This is early 1890s,
Okay.
because the notch is there still.
So when they started working the open cut as
Mhm.
we know it, was it completely filled with water at that point and they had to evacuate the water?
No,
Or
no.
are we assuming this mysterious notch that's coming out was they were digging through and just came into this open cut?
They were above water. Of course, when they got down to a level that they may have already gotten to here, they had to put pumps in. If you
Okay.
notice that one of the pictures of the open cut floor
Mhm.
has a little trench in it that would take water out through the opening
Yeah.
and then down
that's-
into the walk-in,
Yeah. Neat. Which still comes out today, actually.
which still comes out today, which determines what the level of water is
Yeah.
in the open cut. Let me see. We should see if there's any. I can't read on my glasses on.
Oh, they said we should make a calendar with the images.
No.
Mhm.
That would be a fantastic thing.
I like
But
it.
I want to know how many people still use calendars. I'm a fan of them personally, but I don't know how many people do.
So moving on. This is a good look of the notch, which actually lines up with the ore body here. This is that hole that now descends on an angle down to about the 300 level, just follows the ore, which was the best possible situation that they could have. Because if they're digging right into the ore body, the ore that they dig out pays for it. They don't have to go underneath it. They just went right down the middle of it. If you see in the distance, that notch is starting to get some infrastructure in it. You can see a little building at the bottom of it. So let's take another look at this. This is what that building looks like. Let me just go back again. If you look at the dark vertical notch right in the middle of your screen there, all right, just to the left of the cable that you see, it's got a little building down in the bottom of it. And why? Because there was a little shaft, or they were following the ore from in there too. Because it's at this point where the notch is. The ore body took a dive. There took a dive down to like 1,500 feet, and it was no longer at the surface. So they decided to start from here. They left the ore that's in it, and look, all this wonderful dark ore. I'd love to see this in color, just to see if it's like zincite, just to see if it's
Right.
whatever it is. Mengenberzolite, who the heck knows?
It looks like a face.
Now,
Looks
interesting,
like-
right? It looks like a face with a big. It looks like the guy in Ghostbusters at the end, Stay Puft.
Stay put.
Yeah. But look at this. One of the little mysteries that would come on. Look at this bicycle that's to the left of the open door there. It's got inflated wheels. Now, there's been some discussion as to inflated wheels didn't come until much later, but there it is. And just look at that ore up there. This is a local resident, grandfather or like great grandfather from the Van Tassel, family. That was one of the first workers to start working on that left side of the ore body coming down the hill. And they went like this, and I don't know whether OSHA would allow things like this now,
No.
but there was probably a few dozen that started to work that left side of the hill because they couldn't leave it there because it was just as good ore as the other ore, just as good as this black ore, but it was probably the first situation where it was more difficult to get to. So, and this, of course, is what it looks like today. And you can see the notch. The notch has been cleared of all the ore. You can see that that right side wall is completely vertical because the ore was here, which meant, the ore was in the notch, which meant that it extended all the way back along this easterly wall. And you saw the pictures of them taking it out with the donkeys. It's a much different look now here than it was back in those days. And I have to credit Bobby Truen with taking these pictures. Now we're looking at the west vein, the west side, where that really thin section of ore went all the way from the open cut and ended at the Hamburg Road mine, which is just off of Main Street, just before Junction Street. This is where, like in the notch, the ore body dove down again to a depth of the Empire State Building. So this is the last place. This is just off of High Street. This is the last place that you can see the ore in situ. This is exactly how the ore looked when the Dutch came. All right. This is now privately owned, and there's been a request by none other than the Smithsonian to not touch this ore here, not to touch this outcrop here, because it's the only piece of the Franklin ore body that still sits like it was 1.2 billion years ago.
All right. We do have a question that is asking, was the flooding planned?
Yeah, they knew that it was going to fill up with water. What happened was the mine closed on September 30th, 1954, because there was no more zinc ore. It was just done. But this whole ore body that we've been talking about here was cradled by a layer of iron, probably the extension of the Franklin Iron Company's workings. And what they did was they left the pumps on for at least a month, offering that iron bed to Bethlehem Steel and to U.S. Steel to see if they wanted to exploit it. They thought about it, but then they said no. And so the zinc company turned the pumps off, turned the lights out, and I forgot what the time was. I'd like to ask some of the old timers here, but it was like about a year before it filled up from the 1500 level to get to here. And what you're seeing here is the level of this water is where the water table is. And there was some discussion that it's the same level as the Franklin Pond. No, it isn't. It has nothing to do with that, but is constantly recharged from the mines. I'd like to take an underwater submersible and just look around down in there.
That would be so awesome.
Yeah. But now we're on the west vein. Now we're on that real thin slice that we had. You're looking up here, those little chimneys that you see on the upper left, that's probably where Trotter is today. All right. That's where Trotter. So you're going along here. Franklin Borough Hall is up here on the left, B.D. Simmons. So you're looking south northwest along that strike. And again, it ends up at the Hamburg Road mine on High Street before it starts diving down. For those of you that live up here, you'll note that as you're coming to the middle of town on Junction Street, there's a little hill before you come down to the traffic light. But if you go down to Parker Street next to the Jehovah's Witness building, there is no hill. It's flat there coming out to Main Street. That's because on Junction Street, it's this ore body still descending. So if you were to dig right off of Junction Street, you'd go right into the ore. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. This is a mess. All right. This is the, hold on. Bear with me 1 second. This is state-of-the-art mining for all these other companies. It was Amos Taylor, all right, that ran the operation that we've been looking at right into the big hole, right where the ore body was all consolidated. Somehow or other, he made it so that was his. Everything else that was left, like remember when we looked at the fish hook and the little thin piece that came up to the surface, that was left for all these other guys that wanted a piece of the action, but really couldn't be the big time players. You're looking at where Trotter shaft will end up. That's right in the foreground here. And to show how early this is, and some feel this may be the first photo of Franklin mining ever. You can see where the cow fence was here, or where the rocks out in the front, where their cow fence. But you can see them digging. You can see if you just follow along where the buildings are, you can see where all the different operations are. There were 14 different operations over various years. Franklin Borough Hall is to the left edge center, the center of the left edge. You don't see that. You don't see the Franklin Theater. You don't see B.D. Simmons. But there have been other pictures where you see this pipe at the top of the rock pile there. You can see a pipe going to the left. That's the pipe that you see in other pictures crossing Main Street. That was a steam pipe. And you see all these operations going down here. And boy, this, would you work here? This is that little thin top of the fish hook that these smaller mining operations couldn't afford to make a shaft that went through the non-ore to get behind the ore. They went right down into ore, in the ore. So what they're doing is they're trenching here. And as they get down a little bit, well, they got to make sure that they don't forget that they're trenching on a 53-degree angle to the right, down and to the right. Look at what they got to do once they get down a little ways to make sure that it doesn't all fall off. All right. The way to really do mining like this is to build a shaft that's angled behind the ore body, so you can then drift over to where the ore is and take it out that way. These guys couldn't, and there's all these operations, and you talk about ramshackle. And you can see at the bottom of the picture, if you look into that hole, there's a little ladder underneath there. I don't know. It's amazing we didn't have hundreds of people die. But they wanted that ore. They wanted a piece of the pie. And this is the part that the guys mining the bigger hook part of, of the keel there, they didn't want to have anything to do with this because all of their ore was like right there next to them. Now, in later years, this got cleaned up. All right. It went from this, and this is probably earliest 1880s, maybe late 1870s, to this, which is they're much later. They've got the railroad coming in. If you see the little platform right in the lower middle with the little wooden ladder coming up to it, that's where Ding Dong Shaft is like today. In this middle trench here, it's a nice smooth ramp going down to the end wall down here. What is different today is that this crack piece to the far right actually fell off. They mined it out. But you walk down, just keep walking down that little trench to the very end where you see a wall. Go up to the top of that wall, and that's High Street. That's High Street today. And the reason why they left these walls in, this is all ore on the left-hand side. It's all ore on that wall down at the end. They left it in as the pillar. It was called the High Street pillar that was used to support the mine. And actually in this wall, a bunch of you know that there's some pretty spectacular Wollemites that are in this wall here.
Also, the amazing thing with this is the left side of your picture here is all ore, but the right side is all Kittatinny ledge.
Yeah.
So you're 30 feet apart and two different mineral specimens.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Remember those fish hooks? They were very narrow up at the top, and where this trench is where those fish hooks started. And like I say, High Street is at the top of the wall down in the distance. You can see the white roof of Quinn Hotel. So this is but things are starting to get cleared up. As a matter of fact, we're getting very close, if we're not already, at that magic 1898 date where the zinc company said, okay, we can't let this stuff continue. We want to get, the ore, but we got to get people in there that know what they're doing. So the great consolidation happens. There's tons of lawsuits, which is a whole nother book, a whole nother subject, but then that's how they got to here. So things are starting to look a little bit better. All right. Now this one's interesting. Things got a lot better. The New Jersey Zinc Company consolidated everything. This is the same operations many years later, which is right behind Franklin Borough Hall now. Trotter Shaft is just out of frame to the right. This is Ding Dong and the number 4 shaft. Number 4 shaft is on the right. Ding Dong is just to the left of it. And you can see that they've got ore cars up here, but they're not for ore. They're for tailings. Some of you remember the big pit that's behind these 2 shafts here. That's where they dump the tailings. As a matter of fact, if you were to zoom into this ore car that's to the far left here, behind the little timber pile, it's actually dumping its tailings into a conveyor that takes it into that open pit. For those of you that swam at the Franklin Pond, they always use tailings from this pit for the sand on the beach. And the interesting thing about it, it was of such purity that the sand would never burn your feet. The Franklin marble. Look at all these timbers that are around here, though. And what ended up towards was that the Trotter area and all these ramshackle mines that we just looked at became reutilized to be the main timber shafts. All right. They also had one out by the Palmer shaft too, but they use this one for certain parts of the mine versus the other one for other parts. I don't know if you can see it, but look at the last timber pile to the far left. All right. Just on this side of this is where the little road comes up behind Borough Hall to get to this area. But look at underneath. That's the old adit, which would be behind B.D. Simmons' lumber shed, where the men could go in underneath these railroad tracks and go work Ding Dong. But the whole idea here is that this is, and what you see is they're also taking timbers from the other side of the pit here too, to the upper right. Looking at this picture, look at the little 2 open fields right up above like Ding Dong shaft there. That's where Franklin Farms is today on the left field, and to the right is where the condos are. Franklin Meadows. And we're coming back, and today, as we say, this is the east wall of the open cut. You can see how it's been, scaled down to just about vertical. You can see some leftover ore that they've left in there. That's the darker material. Yes, that'll light up, but it's far more docile than what it used to be. And this is the other side. This is that 53-degree angle, from the eye of the fish hook, coming down to the hook to where the keel was, to where it was folded over. And you can see that they did a really good job getting all the ore on that side, which was the most difficult side, that they were working on there because of the steepness. And that's what it looks like today. And there's the notch. The notch has all the ore removed out of it. Again, I'm going to show you a little close. This tool right in the front was called by some the Widowmaker. It's what they used, and it was compressed air that ran it. to drill holes into the side of the ore body, into the side of walls, which they would pack with dynamite, and they would explode it to bring the pieces down. That, at least in the open cut here, the donkeys, would pick up and cart away to that inclined building that would, that had the inclined conveyor belts that would bring it up to be processed in the complex where we're sitting today at the Mineral Museum. And by the way, all these pictures like this they're courtesy of Stephen Phillips and the Phillips, their family, allowing us in there. This is a close-up of where the notch was. All right, a little bit different there. You can see how delineated that the ore was. But if you look real close at the right wall inside the notch, you can see where the ore body took a turn downwards. You can actually see it in the rocks here. And that's where it started to go down to deeper depths. It would parallel Buckwheat Road for a little ways, underneath Fireman's Park, which used to be Schuster Park. That's why you've had subsidence there. Just beyond the wall of this back chamber here, there's a significant subsidence area. But the ore body would kind of curve a little bit to the left. Picture the ore body between Buckwheat Road and between Main Street. Would curve in front of Gar Van Tassel's house, go down across where like Jehovah's Witnesses and Nestor Street are, and that's why you had the major Nestor Street subsidences. And like I said, keep descending until it got around Pauline Riggio's intersection on Sterling Street there. It actually came up, the last workings at the northernmost end actually came up to about the 650 level. And here's a real good look at that notch. And you can see, look at the right wall. The right wall, you can see the rock that's actually bending down. That's what the ore did there too. That's why there was no more surface mining beyond this point. They had to follow the ore down. And they use a lot of what they took out above it here as fill for other parts of the mine. But that's really something. And you can, and it's one of these days, maybe I'll be able to get in a boat and just go back there, but haven't had that privilege yet. And again, everything that we talked about here was to bring ore up for the New Jersey Zinc Company. And this is the Palmer Shaft. It's also called Mill Number 2. The Parker Shaft was referred to as Mill Number 1. That's at the end of the driveway by the firehouse. But towards the later years, like Parker Shaft only lasted about 9 years, 10 years, and then they built Palmer Shaft in the late 1908, 1909. And so everything that this led to, all the consolidation, all the coordination, all the early efforts led to bringing this ore up and to be processed and sent to Palmerton, Pennsylvania by rail. There was 33 million tons of ore taken from the district. And for the zinc company to build all these different things like this, like all you see, and this was the plant that they built just behind that shaft that was just behind that head frame. You couldn't build this for like $100 million now, probably. But this is the infrastructure. This is how much ore was around Franklin, enough to justify building infrastructure like this, hiring all the hundreds of people that were in here, shipping all the way down to Palmerton, Pennsylvania, all the infrastructure there, all the men that they hired here, there, and it still made a profit. Again, in there, this picture, this is kind of a poignant picture. This was taken the Saturday after they closed on Friday, September 30th. You can see in the near smokestack, you can see puffs of smoke coming out because they did, as we mentioned earlier, try to keep, excuse me, the power plants running to allow the steel companies to make the decision whether or not they wanted the remaining iron ore that was underneath. So that's our little story today. Thank you for listening. If you got questions, please don't hesitate to ask or to follow up with them. And a little bit of the story behind how the zinc mining started here and some of the challenges and some of the efforts and why they went to specific areas to mine and why they didn't to others. So thank you very much.
Phil, thank you very much. A lot of these, I hadn't seen some of those, but they're just a time capsule for what Franklin was and why this museum is here and why it's so important to preserve this history. I think we'll probably have a few more on different subjects on the mining history, but I can't thank you enough for coming in today.
My pleasure.
Lauren, do you have anything else?
Well, it's fantastic to share too, because people that aren't in the area and, collect Franklin minerals, they know the history behind it, because unless they're here in person, they may never see those images or be able to see it. So it's really nice to be able to share that kind of worldwide as well, being we do have people from all over that watch our episodes. So it's really neat to be able to share that. And we even have, certain people are mentioning, some of their family histories as well and some of the stories there. So that's really fantastic. And for anybody that is a delayed watcher and is going to rewatch early on, again, at any time, you can leave comments and we'll be following up with all those comments on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll get you the answers if you have any questions.
If anybody has any questions, Phil, I think we have some new comments there. So the other thing I'd like to add is that this is all our mining history, and we're not even delving into the fluorescent aspects of this, which I think is a different show, but and how they came to fruition in collecting them. It's something, this is larger than all of us, but it's, as I said, it's important to get the knowledge of how this all became and came about. And again, Phil, I can't thank you enough for coming with us today, taking us on our journey in our history.
David Lerman is asking the history of collecting fluorescent minerals between Sterling and Franklin. It was interesting. They didn't realize the fluorescence until later years when they started running electricity downstairs and downstairs down in the mine, and the ore cars, when they're going by, the locomotive on them would make the wires spark, and it's when the wires sparked, it made the walls light up all of these incredible colors. And that was probably the first of it. And I know there was some that was showing up with things like acetylene torches and everything like that. So it was kind of a discovery process for everybody here, because all the things that we're talking about, I forgot how many zinc minerals are: salarite, zincite, franklinite, willemite, and God knows what else. There's 300 or 400, 300, and there are 40 some different minerals that came out of this ore body, most of which were not zinc bearing, and some are just spectacular, many of which are not found anywhere else. Many fluoresce in different colors when subjected to ultraviolet light, and if you go a foot and a half to the left or to the right, like John said, of the ore body, there's nothing but country gray rock. Meanwhile, in the ore body, you can have rocks with gold, nickeline. There's about 9 uranium materials and silver, and it's what put this here. That's a whole nother presentation.
Yeah.
But Franklin's, to the geology world, Franklin is Disneyland, and there's the old saying, Franklin's world famous every place except for Franklin.
And that's why we're here, because we're going to make it famous again. Right. Right, Phil?
Right.
Right, Laura?
Yep.
What did Mr. Kydum say?
When the cut switches were thrown, they arced and produced some UV light.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Great stuff. And right across the road, like we said, from what had been the country's richest iron mine, right across the road. Who would have thought? Neat stuff.
Well, thank you very much all for coming. You can go to our Facebook page, check our updates for what's going on in the next month. Obviously, the mineral show is the weekend of the 17th and 18th. We have night digs coming up. We have the mill site dig coming up, and that will go live again, as Lauren said, the weekend of the mineral show for registration. And again, reach out to us if you have questions, and we hope to see you in the following weeks. Thank you all.
Have a good weekend.